The final cuts have been made as the Carolina Hurricanes announced their opening night roster. Who made the final cut? Who else is going to other places? That and so much more on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes.
Your Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everyday for making this your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the Carolina Hurricanes credentialed beat writer over at the Hockey Writers. I'm also going to be starting up a Chicago Wolves column here very soon called Wolves Weekly, since their home opener is on October 12th against the Milwaukee Admirals. I'm the co-host of the Surgecast. This is a weekly Carolina Hurricanes podcast, along with all my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. So before we jump into what we're doing on this episode on Tuesday, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, on Tuesday's edition of Locked On Hurricanes, me and my special guest, we're going to be talking about how the Hurricanes announced their opening night roster, who kind of made it, what names kind of stand out to both of us for the most part, and then also going to be talking about who is going to Chicago, because the Chicago Wolves, outside of Sunday, added some more players to their roster, of course, after the rosters were officially announced for the opening night deadline at 5 p.m. Eastern. And then at the very end of the show, we are going to preview the 2024-25 Chicago Wolves. And, of course, the person that we have to bring in to talk about it, friend of the show, you know him, you love him, it is Andrew Rinaldi of the Calder Times. Andrew, how are you doing? And thank you once again for jumping on and talking some Chicago Wolves with me.
Thanks for having me once again. I'm doing great. I just came back to civilization after a week out in Maine, so
there you go.
I like my little nature cleanse. Disconnect from the world for about a week or so, and it was wonderful. It was great getting in, like really introducing autumn coming in. But now, hockey season's right around the corner. I'm plugged back in and we're ready to go.
Yeah, no, you definitely need a little bit of a nature cleanse, especially with the very busy schedule our lives are going to be. It's like, oh, you wanted to hang out tonight? Let me see if there's no games going on. That's for sure. Especially with you covering two teams in the American, of course, me doing the Hurricanes and the Chicago Wolves over at the Hockey Writers. So, we're kind of covering the same team here and there, doing a little bit of an overlap. But yeah, for both of us, what's a break? There is no rest for the wicked, as they say. So, but it should be a good time for sure. And of course, like I said, Monday afternoon. I know you're more of a Detroit Red Wings guy. Locked On Hurricanes and stuff like that. But I know for your team and my team, we both had to see who's kind of staying, who's going, and stuff like that, because everyone had to get their opening night rosters done by 5 p.m. And of course, that's some cap. You got to be cap compliant. You also got to be roster compliant, because you got to have 23 max roster. You can have less, stuff like that, because some teams might carry 20, 22. You got to make sure how your dollar amount works, because that's just all depends and stuff like that. I heard that the Toronto Maple Leafs made it by $1. So I mean, you're talking cutting it close. You're cutting it close.
That checks out.
Yeah, that checks out. And I know for the Carolina Hurricanes, they did make it in just because of the fact they're using some LTIR. They did send Riley Stillman to the LTIR list, just so they can kind of be, cap compliant, kind of do some, cap, not manipulation, but try to make it work. So his $775,000 actually eliminates the $774,000 that they're technically over, but you got to love the CBA and how to figure out how to do all of that. That's why guys like, Schwartz and all of them behind the scenes or the Hurricanes are like, all right, how can we get this down to 1 cent? How can we become cat compliant? But the Hurricanes, like I said, did officially make their roster. So as of right now, of course, you really can't do anything until Wednesday, because there is that freeze period between Monday and Wednesday where you can't make any moves. After that, you do have some time on Thursday and also Friday to make some more moves before your first game of the season. But as of right now, the Carolina Hurricanes have Shane Gostisbehere, Jalen Chatfield, Demetri Orlov, and Brent Burns, along with Jordan Stahl, Jack Drury, and Sebastian Aho. Of course, no surprise, Brendan Lemieux, Seth Jarvis, Sean Walker. But here's the kicker, though. Tyson Jost does make the roster along with Eric Robinson, 2 former Buffalo Sabres. So that's really interesting. William Carrier, Andrei Svechnikov, Jordan Martinook, no surprises here. Newly signed Bryce Montgomery did make the roster after signing his 3-year ELC. Jacob Slavin, Jesperi Cook, Jimmy Martin Lucius, and then, of course, Jack Roslovic are your forwards. Frederick Anderson and Pierre Kochetkov made it for your goaltenders. Of course, former Chicago Wolf, Calder Cup winner, and Pierre Kochetkov. And then for the injured non-roster list, we got Joachim Ryan, Jesper Fost, and Riley Stillman. And of course, we mentioned a little bit ago, Riley Stillman being put on LTIR. So that's kind of an issue what the roster is. I mean, Andrew, I know, it's when you look at a roster, you're like, okay, who made it? Like, why does it make sense for these guys to do that? So the Hurricanes have 13 forwards, 7 defensemen, and 2 goaltenders. And I know a lot of people are kind of surprised by, Bryce Montgomery being there. But if you look at how your defense is to Joachim Ryan, who some people thought was probably going to go to Chicago, LTIR. Same with Riley Stillman. Of course, Riley Stillman, a former Rochester American, everywhere he's also been. The dude's been pretty much everywhere. But what kind of, initially looking at this roster, what kind of jumped out to you in terms of certain guys you're like, okay, that's an interesting choice.
Yeah, I think that a lot of Hurricanes fans were real big on some of these young guys coming in, like Bradley Nadeau and Jackson Blake, who had real shots to make the opening roster. Now, not saying that they're not going to be in the lineup one way or another by opening night, but initially, and again, it could be just kind of like the way you're navigating the cap and all that.
Paper moves and all that, because you know how that works out usually.
Yeah, but not seeing any of them early on. That jumped out as a bit of a surprise, and along with Bryce Montgomery. I mean, he's certainly a great player. I wasn't necessarily expecting him to be in night 1, but again, this is not the finalized absolute night 1 roster. So a couple surprises here and there. I'd like to see Nadeau and Jackson Blake in Wolves uniforms on Saturday, but anything can happen. It feels like it's still so far away, and yet it's just in a couple of days.
Yeah, it's that weird, that you're in that weird space of okay, it seems far away, but it's also holy crap, it's right around the corner. But yeah, I agree. It's just one of the things where it could be some paper moves, stuff like that. And, like I said, he was a 2021 draft pick in Bryce Montgomery, and he just signed his ELC. Of course, 6'4". I think from what they have him listed as, he is 224 pounds of right shot defenseman. So he is a big boy who can throw some big boy hits. So I'm not surprised why they might go with him, just because the fact they said you got Ryan and Stillman both on the injury reserve list. They're like, you know what? Well, if we're going to need a 7th defenseman, he did pretty well for the most part. Did play a lot of late in the season, in the preseason at least. So, but like you said too, it's one of those things where let's not get too about it, because that's just, you have to make it work for your cap compliance, and stuff can happen after Wednesday. These aren't the final set rosters, because we all know what happened 2 seasons ago. Jordan Martin was put on waivers, went down, came back. It didn't really matter. It's just one of those things where you got to make it work. And probably the same thing for you, man, during your Detroit Red Wings. I know there's probably some moves where you're like, but then also be like, no, that actually does make sense. So.
Yep, Austin Watson and Justin Hall and those whole situations. I know fans are completely up in arms because Marco Kasper isn't on the initial roster, but again, it's all just kind of a base level idea of where you're at as a team, and then you can kind of make the tweaks afterwards and kind of get a better idea, I guess, as we get closer to opening night here.
Yeah, for sure. Well, because you look at, because I know Sunday afternoon, a lot of teams made their moves. You go from having super huge preseason camp rosters to maybe you get 25, 26 guys left. And then you do Monday, you got to do a couple more cuts. And Jackson Blake was one of those guys that initially made the 25-man roster. I know everyone was kind of like, oh, he made it. This is awesome. Will he make the final 23? And he didn't make it. Of course, like we said, it could be changed by Friday, but let's just say by happenstance that, he did initially make the roster, but maybe it's just one of those things where you look at the roster, how it's set up with the 13 forwards you got. Would it be better to have Jackson Blake fight for a fourth line role or start the season in Chicago, which for me, you can't really go wrong with either option. But if you want to get him that proper development and get him some upper top 6 minutes, Chicago is not a bad option with Cam Abbott. So, what would you say to those fans of, let's just say for your Detroit Red Wings, would you rather have a guy who's really one of your top 2 prospects, not Alexander Nikishin, because Nikishin is just a whole other level, but would you rather have him fight for a fourth line role, or would you rather have him be in the AHL getting those top 6 minutes starting out? What would you do with that? How would you make that work out?
Yeah, I mean, developmentally for a young player, especially, Blake at 21 or Nadeau at 19, it does so much more for them. I don't think people need to kind of step back and realize just how young that is and how you're skating against, grown men night in and night out.
Yeah, especially with how the league is now. I mean, we're all watching that Face Off documentary from Amazon Prime, which if you haven't yet, do it. It's great. I'm 2 episodes in. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you look at where the league is now compared to not even 10 years ago. Yeah, it's a whole another level of bigger, faster, stronger in the NHL. You really don't want to send these guys out and be like, have fun.
Right. I think, you develop a lot of great habits when you go down there into a place like Chicago, where, you're seeing first line minutes, power play time, throw in some PK time in there for you. And it does so much better than, all right, here, we're going to throw you on the fourth line. We know you're an offensive player, but you're going to be on the fourth line here playing with, Jordan Martinook and Jordan Stahl and just absolute defensive specialists. And that just doesn't help round your game out, And it's you're always going to have, your injuries and everything, in which case they're going to come up and get their opportunities to perform. But if you're going to start out in Chicago and just more ice, more opportunities, just getting out there, because you can practice and practice and practice all you want, but it doesn't compare to that game speed. And when you have more minutes doing that, it's just going to be better off for you. And I'm going to say it, whether you're a Hurricanes fan or you're a Red Wing fan complaining that Marco Kasper is not in the lineup, it's okay to be a little patient with these guys. I know we want to see them come in and just blow the doors down, but you also don't want to see them come in and just get their confidence completely rocked. So I think it's good to kind of, add a little extra seasoning to your steak, and then you throw it on the grill.
Right. Exactly. Let's say, you're looking at your guys. I mean, I love, Jonathan Berger, and you don't want to get, you see him come up, get smoked, have to go back down, or let's say Nick Robinson, the Maple Leafs, up and down, gets killed, tries to come in, tries to do what he needs to do, but then doesn't really catch on. So, yeah, it's when you look at Berger or Robertson, or you look at Blake, Nadeau, you want these guys to prosper, but you want them to try to break you down the bottom 6. And then, how does that work out for them? Where, you would love to see them in the top 6, but who do you take out outside of, who the Hurricanes have now? You've got Nietzsche, Kotkaniemi, Svechnikov as your second line. Jack Roslovic, is kind of showing what he can do, and Sebastian Aho and Seth Jarvis. Who do you really take out of your top 6? And for your top 9, like you said, you have the Jordans and Martinook and Stahl, and then you have William Carrier. You're not going to move Carrier out. So, so you're basically now you're on the line with Jack Drury as your center, which isn't not a bad guy to have as your center. But then it's Robinson, Joseph, Lemieux. That's a tough spot to be in, because now you have to take one of those guys out and move them, send them down to the AHL or make them an extra. And right now I could see why. I mean, I understand why I would love to see one of these younger guys like Blake or someone break in, but it's also a good thing to have him in Chicago too, because that's what the AHL, you want to win in the AHL, but it's also there to help you develop to become an AHL player. But if you guys start there, there's nothing wrong with that, especially who they have as a head coach, because Cam Abbott has guys. I mean, he coached Niles Hoaglander, and he just got a 3x3 with the Canucks. Mm-hmm. And he also coached Moritz Seider, who just got a big boy contract with the Red Wings over the offseason. So I would say Cam Abbott's got a pretty good track record of setting some guys up to have some legit AHL careers. So, like I said, if you got Ungerstorm starting down there, Blake, Nadeau for your first professional seasons, not a bad spot to be in, all things considered.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. All right, so stick around here, guys, real quick, because we are going to be talking about more players who did go to the Chicago Wolves outside of Jackson Blake on Tuesday, as there were some waivers that they had to go through and stuff like that. So make sure to stick around, as we'll talk about that here in a second on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Where can you do that? Well, you can do that at FanDuel.com. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Of course, back here with Andrew Rinaldi once again, and we can talk about more guys who got sent down the Chicago Wolves. And of course, it comes as no surprise when you look at who the Hurricanes did send down. Josiah Slavin, Ryan Suzuki, and those guys got sent through waivers along with Ty Smith. And of course, this is kind of how it works out with the waiver stuff like that. Of course, Jackson Blake, we talked about in segment 1, did make it down as well. So now you're adding 4 more guys onto the initial 15 that were sent down on Sunday. So, Andrew, like, you see the guys that came down. You got Josiah Slavin, former Rockford Ice Hog. This guy's been name every other, like San Diego. Yeah. He's basically been here, there, and everywhere. And of course, you got Ryan Suzuki back, which you're hoping that he plays well after he got basically sent to the barren wastelands of Springfield and playing almost no time there. And you get Ty Smith, who's also been there and done that in the NHL and the American League. But out of those 4 guys, how do you feel about getting them as part of that initial 15 as well?
Yeah. I mean, Wolves fans are pretty familiar with Ryan Suzuki at this point, and yeah. You feel like he got that 1-year deal this offseason. It's it's been real unfortunate for him, right? Because he's dealt with injury issues, at least in his time in Chicago, and then dealing with the Springfield situation. You forget this guy was a first-round pick because it just you can see the talent there on the ice, but it's just been so hard for him to be consistent with it because it's just
can't catch a break, man. He just can't catch a break. That's the only thing for him.
Mm-hmm. But I'm hoping that you have that reunited structure with the reunion of the Wolves and the Canes. So hopefully he's got a little more stability there. He's got a good coaching staff that's going to hopefully get those wheels back turning for him. I'd really love to see Ryan Suzuki kind of remember I was a first round pick and kind of blow the doors down, but I just want to see him put it together at a real solid and full season of hockey. That would be awesome for me. And of course,
for sure,
it would be awesome for Canes fans, for Wolves fans. It'd be awesome for everyone.
Yeah, no, 100%. And you look at now, too, and, of course, I get your opinion. Skylar Brindamore did sign a 1-year, 2-way deal with the Canes over the weekend, too, right after their game against Nashville. And he brings another center to the team, a big defensive style to his game, penalty kill minutes as well, which was kind of interesting for the fact that he just did sign a 2-year contract with the Charlotte Checkers last year, of course. It was an AHL deal, was no affiliation, so he wasn't really a Panthers player. So, mutually terminated, came to Canes camp as a PTO, got signed, and now he's adding another center to a depth that probably sees Suzuki, maybe Josiah Slavin, maybe Felix Ungerstorm, because he played a lot of center throughout preseason. So let's say he plays center for the Wolves, and now you got Skylar Brindamore. That's not a bad 1, 2, 3, 4 for the Chicago Wolves going into the season. How do you feel about the Brindamore deal, and then looking at how that spine of that Chicago Wolves team is going to be down the middle?
Yeah, absolutely. That was kind of when I was kind of building my Wolves roster in my notes app on my phone and kind of taking a look at what was going on. I liked what appeared at the top, between Zook, Ungersorum, maybe Nadeau and Blake. That would be nice. But, other than that, you got Yuhayaska coming in.
Oh, he's so good.
But it felt like it was kind of thin down in the bottom 6. So you get Skylar Brindamore in, guy who obviously, like his namesake, real solid defensively and responsible in his own end.
Yeah, he's definitely his dad, that's for sure, in terms of he's not afraid to throw the body and play defensive style hockey. So yeah, he is definitely his dad through and through. 100%.
And so kind of filling out that depth that I was kind of concerned about heading into the camps. That'll certainly help kind of shore the forward group up there for the Wolves.
No, 100%. And another guy, we talk about guys who got reassigned in other places. Anthony Honka is going back over to the Swiss League. Wondering how that's going to work out for him. But another guy that was on a PTO with the Hurricanes was Rocco Grimaldi. Of course, he had a huge season with the Wolves last year. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, you know what? Would not be upset if the Wolves outright just sign him to an AHL deal and be like, hey, Rocco, come back and have him kind of help these younger guys out. Rocco Grimaldi would be a really solid option of the Chicago Wolves. Like, are you on the same boat as me? Are you hoping the Wolves are like, hey, Rocco, you want to come back? You want to run this back one more time with a really solid lineup this year?
Yeah. Considering he was second in the AHL in points for a team that was, I don't remember if they were last or second to last.
Second to last by one. Thank you, Bridgeport Island. Thank you, Bridgeport, for the one less point.
Oh, jeez. So it's I've enjoyed watching Grimaldi in this league. I've thought that I know he's got a few NHL seasons in his pocket, but I thought he had the talent to kind of stick around for a little longer than he did. No matter how many times he's gone out and shown out, whether it's been in, Rockford, Milwaukee, or Chicago, for whatever reason, this guy just can't catch an NHL contract. So
sounds like another guy we always talk about who just deserves some justice.
There's a few guys like that, but
there's a few.
Rocco and Potts are definitely in the top 5 of my list. But at any rate, if he can't get an NHL deal out there, he's. I mean, you had your rapport with the Hurricanes management and over this training camp. They liked you enough to bring you in on a PTO. Why not kind of stick with the staff, keep your head down, work with some of these young guys and see what could happen in Chicago. I'd really like to have him come back and not, have to feel like he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders, but instead just more of a compliment towards a much deeper group this time around.
Yeah, no, 100%. And also, wouldn't be bad to see a nice little letter on the front of his jersey, too, if he does come back. So, I mean, but that's what I'm hoping for. If we're talking to any guy that I hope the Wolves bring in outside of the prospects that they just got influx with from Carolina, Rocco Grimaldi would not be a bad guy to have on this roster. So, but yeah, I mean, like I said, we talked about the 15 guys who initially came in. You got the other 4 that just showed up, too, with Ty Smith adding a little bit to the defense. And honestly, I know we'll talk about it here in a little bit more, but man, you add Ty Smith to what this defense already looks like. Who do you play? Who do you play on defense in Chicago at this point? With how heavy that group's going to be, because the initial group had 5 or 6 defensemen already. Then now you add Ty Smith to that too. Oh boy, good luck getting ice time, I guess.
It's going to be competitive for sure. I really like what I'm seeing from the blue line, how it's going to look in Chicago. I'm not saying it's going to be as good as the 2022 squad that won the Calder Cup, but
I mean, it's the 2022 squad. I mean, is there anyone that's really going to touch that group though?
That's beside the point, but
it's like,
I like that. Like, you just look at the names that are running down there. Even with, I was hoping Anthony Honka would be coming this way, but unfortunately, it seemed like it. But when you got Ty Smith joining, Ronan Seeley, Dominic Vansore, Alexi Heimosalme, it's just the core common trait of all these guys is that they're great skaters and they can move the puck out of the danger areas and away from pressure, which is something that they really struggled with last year, along with just about every other facet of the game of hockey. And it was my favorite trait of that 22 team when you had guys like Jalen Chatfield, Joey Keane, Max Lajoie, where you can take those one chance against, and then you can spin it around and get it out of the zone. And in the transition, now you're attacking the other way. And it helps your defensive partners out. It helps your goaltenders out. It makes it makes it way easier on your coaches, makes it easier on fans. I think that's going to be a real strength of this team here, and is kind of like taking the pressure off opposing teams' forecheck and turning defense into offense. And that's what I'm really excited to kind of see what this group's capable of this season.
No, 100% for sure. And you know what? That's a perfect segue into our third segment, where we're actually just going to talk about the 2024-25 Chicago Wolves, previewing the season, where we think they're going to be, and talk about all the other guys. We didn't even talk about the forwards. We just kind of slightly touched about the defense. So we're going to be talking about what this roster could look like on opening night here that's in the coming days. So make sure to stick around, guys, for segment 3, as we are going to be previewing the 24-25 Chicago Wolves here in a second on a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. We're driven by the search for better, but when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't a search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million globally monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed study. One of the things I love about Indeed is the fact that you can just upload your resume, upload your certificates, if you got CDLs, all that type of stuff. You can add it in there, and then you can help match you to what job you're looking for. And if you're a job, looking for certain hires, well, with Indeed, they are leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day. And Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences. So the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 million businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your job more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying that you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Once again, that is Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. You need to hire? Well, you just need Indeed. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. And now, time to get into the really good stuff as we are previewing the 24-25 Chicago Wolves as they start their season this weekend. Of course, the home opener is on the 12th against the Milwaukee Admirals. And going back real quick to the guys who got assigned in Chicago over the weekend, of course, we talked about Skylar Brendamore, Noel Gunler, who I absolutely loved going into the rookie showcase. I thought, that's the guy to keep an eye on. Absolutely showed out, got 5 points. You love to see it. Had a great preseason in camp as well. And also Monday was his birthday, so happy birthday, Noel Gunler. Also, Yoha Haska, which Andrew brought up back in segment 2, Bradley Doe, Justin Robidoux, who's another guy that I'm really high on. Did pretty good. He did really good in the ECHL last year. We give him his first full season in the American. I think this kid's going to pop off. How about Gleb Cherekasov? 5 points in the rookie showcase as well. Just signed his ELC. First pro season in North America. I think this kid's going to be fun to watch. And, of course, Felix Under-Sorum, going back to the defense one more time that Andrew talked about last part of the show. Dominic Fensori, Alexei Himelsami, Charles Alexis Legault, Scott Morrow, and Roden Sealy. Woo! Talk about a 5 coming down to the Chicago Wolves. And then you got Ruslan Kayasev, Spencer Martin in the Dark Knight pads, and Yanov Peretz, who played in the ECHL with the Norfolk Admirals last year. And, of course, the guys who made it through waivers, Josiah Slavin, Ty Smith, Ryan Suzuki, and, of course, as of right now, Jackson Blake. Andrew, how does this roster look to you right now with just these names that I've just listed that got reassigned to Chicago? Who? Let's talk. We don't even talk about the defense a little bit, but let's start with the forwards first. Who is really jumping out to you in this forward group that you are super excited about watching this year?
Well, I kind of already popped off on Ryan Suzuki a little bit. I'm going to hold off on guys like Blake or Nadeau until we kind of understand who's actually going to be in there in the Sunday lineup.
Right.
Sorry. But
either one.
after kind of watching what he did in the rookie showcase and everything, I'm really looking at, and not just because he has a fun name, but Gleb Trikasov. I mean, I think after watching last year's just kind of abysmal offensive show, getting another guy in there who can really kind of fire the puck and just gets real creative with it offensively, I think he can be a real quick fan favorite in Chicago. I think that again, I pay so much attention to the defense. I really like what they got going on there. Mm-hmm. One of the reasons why I'd love to see Rocco Grimaldi come in is just because, like, outside of Yaska and kind of Brenda Moore, I mean, he's had a full pro season in there, and he was in college for like 18 years, and it's hard to understand that he's 25 years old, so he's a bit more on like the veteran side, but it's a very young forward group that I see in there as well, and I think I would like to see another veteran come in on SPC, a standard player contract like Grimaldi, and to kind of keep the set an example for these young guys. But you can't deny that they're certainly talented up there in that forward group. I've liked that they've filled out the depth a little more, like I mentioned earlier. So I like Trikasov. You mentioned Justin Robidas. He could be a very interesting name going up there. Of course, Unger Sorum's another interesting one. It feels like there's a lot of guys that are kind of like right on that cusp of breaking into the NHL lineup, which is what they're here for in Chicago, and what was, I think, missing for Carolina last year is that stability to kind of work within the system. It's like you're right there. Here's where you can improve. Here's where we like your game. Boom, boom, boom. Next thing you know, they're contributing to the big clubs. So a lot of interesting names up there and in the forward group. Of course, like I said, I got my eye on Suzuki, Trikasov, and when we understand better, of course, if Blake and Nadeau are still there, I'm not going to complain.
No, not going to complain at all. Yeah, it's very interesting how you're going to look at that and be like, okay, who's actually going to be here and stuff like that. And of course, I know we talked about the center core with Slavin, Suzuki, Brenda Moore, and of course, Unger Sorm, since he played a lot of time in those as well. But yeah, Yaska did really well, I thought, in their preseason. Robidas, coming out, I think he's going to be someone to keep an eye on as well. And Gumler, dealt with a lot of injuries last year. Was in Chicago for a little bit, a couple of seasons ago. I'm really hoping that he shows out, and he did in the rookie showcase. Him and Gleb absolutely just showed out. So I'm hoping that works out for him as well. Now, going to the defense, I know we kind of talked about it, but getting Scott Morrow, out there, he played really well at UMass. I know a lot of people were really excited to see him in Carolina, but with where the Hurricanes 6 are right now, it's kind of tough to get rid of Gostisbehere, Walker, Orlov, and Chatfield, and of course Slavin and Burns. You're not going to have this kid play 7th defensive D-man minutes when he's still 21 and someone who could play top 2 defense minutes on this team. So I know he's probably high on the list, but for me, Ronan Seeley, I think he's a guy that's really going to benefit the most from the teams coming back together because he played with the Wolves last year. We didn't know how it was for him and the team last year, but getting all the other high-end prospects back together and being able to actually surround him. And he was the captain of the rookie showcase team, and he did score a goal, and it was a really good one too. I'm really looking forward to see how Ronan Seeley does being back with the full crew of Canes prospects and the Wolves. Who on defense out of those, the 5, and of course with Ty Smith coming back down, who's kind of like, who do you kind of, because you mentioned defense, who's your guy or guys that you're keeping an eye on this year?
Yeah. I mean, you obviously touched on Morrow and Seeley, so I feel like I gotta kind of deviate from that.
Yeah, I would love your opinion on those guys too. I mean, it's all about me here, man. Like that, I'm bringing you on. You watch this as close as I do, or even more. I would love to get your opinion on those two guys as well. So don't feel like you have to be like, well, I can't.
I feel like I really liked Dominic Fensore last year when he came in. It's that quality of that trait I really love of guys who aren't afraid to carry the puck out of the zone and kind of jump up into the rush when they need to. But he was also very competent in playing defensively as well. It wasn't just like he was just offense all the time. So I'd like to see him kind of take that natural step up and see what else he can bring. Again, kind of in a spot where it's like you're not feeling like the weight of the world is on your shoulders to quarterback this power play, because it's like, okay, we got Morrow over here, we got Legault over here,
right.
like you have to do it all. And and so it's I like that you have a couple different options like that. Like I said, Himo Salme is another guy that it's just so smooth with his skating. And I love that kind of dynamic where, they don't look like they're moving around there with the bricks in their skates. And I saw a lot of that last season. And I'm liking the possibilities of improvement here for this Wolves club now that they've moved away from their now defunct independent era. So
the one and done year. So.
So, and then of course, Ty Smith, he's been around the block for a minute. Like you said, you kind of got that bit of that presence there. I was expecting to see Joachim Ryan and
I thought so. I thought so
Riley Stillman as well, but they're injured, so it's probably going to be a little bit before we see either of those guys.
Right.
At any rate, like I said, this group is I feel like it's more, it's packed with a little more punch coming in from the back end, which I like to see from a competitive standpoint. I like to see teams that kind of start with, a solid defensive core. I feel like it can help out you can help out your goaltenders and hide some of those weaknesses a little bit. And then, you can kind of like fill in the gaps with your forwards. You have, 12 forwards versus 6 defensemen. I feel like there's a bit more emphasis. But I used to play defense growing up, so I'm a little biased when it comes to how to construct a team. But I really like what I'm seeing from this blue line here. And for the Wolves to have any kind of success in the Central Division, it's going to have to require some big playmakers making big plays from the blue line.
No, 100%. Thoughts on Morrow and Sealy? I would love to hear what you think about those two guys for sure, being part of the group.
Yeah, Sealy's been around the block for a minute now. He was there in 22-23. He was, he had that assignment halfway through the season last year, and I love what I'm seeing in the progression from this kid. And you can tell he's playing with more confidence, and as a result, he's getting, bigger and bigger roles.
Yep.
And the Wolves are going to lean on him heavily here and going into this season. As you can see, he's clearly got the C in the rookie showcase, and I feel like that's kind of the coaching staff giving him the just bigger votes of confidence, and that's going to propel his game hopefully to the next level, which has been great. He's a late round draft pick. He's been a little kind of on the quiet side, just kind of doing his thing, playing his game, and he's becoming more and more dependable by the day with it. And I love to see it, and I want to see more of it this year. And Scott Morrow, what more can you say? I think if Carolina wasn't quite so stacked, he'd be starting there in the opening night for the Canes.
100%.
Yeah, you guys. This is the issue of having a good hockey team, is that there's only so many roster spots. So your loss is my gain. So I'm going to take that and have myself a ball with it on Saturday. But
hey, we're both covering the Chicago Wolves, so actually, I'm not really losing out. I could just see him just playing a different format of, all right, it's like enjoying my cake and eating it as well, because hey, I get to watch him play. I still get to watch him play regardless. So, but I get what you're saying. It's like, hey, thanks for having him in Carolina right now. I'll gladly watch him in Chicago and absolutely just feast on the Central Division. Now, talking about feasting, How about the goaltender group? Ruslan Kaisev, Spencer Martin, and Yanov Paretz. Of course, we know how good Spencer Martin was last year for the Hurricanes. 4 goals and an assist. 4 goals and assists. 4 wins and a loss. You know what I mean. He did really well. You look at Yanov Paretz, did pretty good in the ECHL with the Norfolk Admiral. And then you kind of look at just how you get Ruslan Kaisev is a really high goaltending prospect for the Hurricanes. When you look at that trio, like how do you feel going into the season with those guys kind of running the show in net for the Wolves?
I really like Spencer Martin as the top option for the Wolves. I mean, you've seen the last couple of years, he's been a very dependable, number, I'd say like 2B, number 3 guy, and
Columbus, Carolina, stuff like that. Yeah, he's very dependable.
Mm-hmm. And so, he's there if you need him for the Canes as the number 3 guy. But if he's not, well, then, like I said, we'll take him here in Chicago.
Right.
He's been playing pro hockey since 2015. He's been around the block. He knows what he's doing, and
yes.
I think he's gonna provide a lot of stability in the net there for the Wolves, and which is especially good again for that blue line core because of how kind of there is a lot of youth in there between Haimasami, Legault, and Morrow that you can kind of, I don't want to necessarily encourage risk taking, but you can take those risks and knowing you have a veteran in there, that might not hurt you so bad. As for Paretz and Kazayev, they're both kind of wild cards, they have the pedigree to make it happen, but here it is, like your first real test in the American Hockey League.
That's a good thing to have Spencer Martin there. It's kind of like it's not,
right.
And you're not leaving the sheets to the wind and being like, good luck and stuff like that.
Right. And I don't know if any of them are going to be going down to the ECHL, maybe gets a little bit more playing time or how that's all going to shake out. In fact, I know that Carolina kind of cleaned house with the coaching staff. I used to really like the goaltending coach for the Chicago Wolves. I mean, between, Pyotr Kochekov, Jordan Binnington, Phoenix Copley, there was just the Wolves had a storied history of a lot of great netminders that have come through the organization.
I mean, hey, nothing wrong with Zach Sarchenko either. I mean, he hasn't really come on very well, but I loved his game when he was in Chicago too. So another good one as well. But
and
there's been some dudes. There's been some dudes.
I have to do some digging to make sure that if Stan Dubicki's still on staff or if
I've not really heard a lot of different moves in terms of just the main here's Cam Abbott, and then of course his 2 right-hand guys. Like past that, I'm in the same boat as you. It's kind of like, hopefully.
I'm gonna go ahead with the assumption that like if the athletic trainer wasn't spared, then I think Carolina went with a whole different direction with the goaltending, which would. Because Stan Dubicki's been there for several different affiliations. Like I said, he's mentored several goaltenders into the NHL. A couple of them have, at least one I know, Jordan Binnington, has won a Stanley Cup. So it's I liked what they did in developing young goaltenders. I kind of wish he was still hanging around, but it is what it is, and we'll see. Kind of, it's hard to predict what you're going to see out of either of these 2 goalies until you see them in the net.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, we kind of ran through what the roster might look like and stuff like that. Now, looking at the Central, I mean, we're not going to be like, all right, rank 1 through whatever the Central is going to be like. But how do you feel going into this season with the Chicago Wolves against a really tough Central division? And I personally think that the Wolves are going to make it back to the Calder Cup playoffs. But how do you feel about that, and how do you feel about them going into, like I said, a very tough Central division? It's always Milwaukee and Iowa and Texas and all that.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry. I went on a Griffins podcast that asked me to rank the Central Division 1 through 7. So I've already got 3 games in my head.
I'm not gonna do that to you. Trust me. Even I'm like, okay, how do we do this? So I'm not gonna put you on the spot. Like, rank them for me.
I'll do kind of like a flyover ranking because things are chaotic in the American Hockey
You're telling me.
Milwaukee's owned this division for the last couple of years. They had a power tandem in that last year, Yaroslav Askarov and Troy Grosnick. Both of those guys are gone.
Yeah, that's gonna be a very interesting case for Milwaukee of how do you run it without those two guys now.
Yeah, but I believe that despite the talent they've lost, they're still a very well coached team that's going to create.
Yeah, it's Milwaukee. Yeah, it's death taxes, and here come the Admirals to just absolutely wrecking shop in the Central.
Yeah.
So yeah, business as usual.
I think Texas is gonna be solid, but they're not gonna have Maverick Bork, who was the MVP last year, or Logan Stankoven. So
yeah, those guys.
There's a little bit less firepower to worry about there. I think your biggest contenders there, I don't think Chicago is going to finish over Rockford or Grand Rapids. I think those are going to be the two heavy hitters. We saw Grand Rapids push Milwaukee to the brink last year. Right. Could be even better this year, so that could be a serious issue. And I'm not just saying that with Griffin's bias on my feet. This is a pretty serious.
No, not at all.
And so I think you're going to see Chicago kind of around that, maybe that 4 or 5 spot, because Iowa is still, for lack of a better term, pretty terrible. And Manitoba is kind of also looking a little on the rough side as well. So I think those are your two teams that missed the playoffs. And I think we're going to see a return for the Wolves in the postseason since their Calder Cup championship.
Yeah, it's been definitely weird for the fact that you're kind of used to seeing them being kind of in those discussions of the playoffs every year. Now they missed the last 2, and last year was like probably the worst time they've ever made the playoffs. So it's definitely a good bounce back for sure. But yeah, I'm kind of with you there. Like I don't see them, doing a quick turnaround like that where you're going like second to last in the entire league to, okay, we're going to go and win the division. Yeah, it's still going to be tough, like you said, because let's not forget there's teams that have maybe less firepower, they're still pretty good. So honestly, 4th wouldn't be bad because at least you're still in the dance. And, maybe they'll catch some heat and maybe things happen because we all know what the Calder Cup players are like. They're crazy in themselves too because outside of for the fact we've had the same 2 teams back-to-back years in the Calder Cup finals, but that's a whole different thing. But yeah, the playoffs are a whole different beast. So honestly, if we just see the Wolves back in the playoffs in general, I think that's going to be good for everyone. So, but I'm kind of with you. It's like, hey, 3-4, not a bad spot to be in after, where you see them last year, of course, with the influx, because it's a lot of new faces on this roster coming up. So yeah, it might take a little time to gel, but hey, that's a good thing about having a season like the AHL is, where a lot of your like 99% of your games are on the weekends. So it's just one of those things where you get a little bit more time to figure it out during practice and your travel days and all of that too. So it'll definitely be interesting for sure. But that will wrap up a Tuesday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. And thank you for making Locked On Hurricanes your first listen today. For your second listen, find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Still and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. But Andrew, thank you as always once again for coming on and talking Wolves with me. I know we kind of, with me being in Palm Springs right now, like not even a couple miles from Coachella Valley's arena, which one, it's nice. The jerseys for the Firebirds are very sick as well, so gotta give a little props to them. But like I said, it's always a good time having you on talking about the Wolves because, hey, you know what? As much as we love the Hurricanes here, we also gotta show some extra love to our Chicago Wolves in terms of being the AHL affiliate. So yeah, like I said, thank you as always for coming on, man. This is always fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me again. You know me, I love talking hockey when I can.
Yeah, no, definitely for sure. But before we let you go, where can people find you on the socials, and where can they find your articles and all that good stuff? And if you do a podcast as well, just the floor is yours, sir. Plug what you need to plug.
Sure thing. So I cover the beat for the Wolves for the publication is called the Calder Times. So I'm going to cover all the prospects and the young players and what they're doing on that website. We're going to have a couple articles coming your way here this weekend as we kick the season off. I'm still going to call it Twitter. I'm never going to call it Twitter. Twitter. for those who can't see below, my little handle is Andrew _ Rinaldi _ and I send out live tweets during the game. I update everyone on what the Wolves are up to. I like chatting with the fans. If you got any questions, if you want to talk trash, tell me my opinion's worthless, you can always find me on there. And with the season coming up, we are going to be kicking off the AHL pre-show season 2, and that's going to be myself and my co-host Deanna McFerrin. We just kind of preview the upcoming weekend and slot of games, throw in a little bit of chaos here and there. A lot of pop culture. It's a fun time.
It's fun, that's for sure. It's definitely a fun time. Yeah.
Yeah, she's my little agent chaos, and I try and match the energy. It's difficult at times, but
D beats their own drum. If you mention chaos, good for you. But no.
I just try to keep up.
I'm just here, so I'm not finding having a good time. That's all it comes down to.
Exactly.
Yes. But yes, make sure you go check that out. Andrew does a great job there with the Calder Times Taps, as they call it. Really good show to check out as well if you need to, in terms of anything for previewing the AHL. For me, you can find me on X at @OneTrueZach. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I do have a link to my bio if you want to go find my articles at the Hockey Writers, or just go to the hockeywriters.com. I actually just hit 150 total articles over there with them over this past weekend. So another milestone achieved on that side of things. If you want to check out the Searchcast, you can look that up on all podcast platforms or on YouTube. That's my other Carolina Hurricanes podcast that I do. For this show, there's links to listen to it or watch it on YouTube. But if you just go to Locked On Hurricanes on all podcast platforms, you can find it there. Leave a 5-star rating and review, because if you do, I might just read it on the show for you guys. For the YouTube side of things, make sure to hit subscribe, hit the bell notifications so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up button. Let me know you like the show as well, because it helps me, garner some more fans and stuff like that, because it'd be kind of cool to get more people subscribed and stuff like that. And of course, if you want to go look it up, just go look up Locked On Hurricanes and share the podcast, because we want to make other Caniacs everydayers just like you, because we officially today on Monday hit 1,000 subscribers. We finally hit the goal. We're at 1,000, so make sure to stay tuned over the next couple of weeks. I will reveal the really cool thing I've been teasing for the last few months. But thank you to everyone who's got us to 1,000. We have finally made it here at Locked On Hurricanes for 1,000 subscribers on this channel. Like I said, make sure to stick around for all that good stuff. But I hope everyone enjoyed this Tuesday episode of Locked On Hurricanes with a little side dash of Wolves for their season preview. Big thank you to Andrew Rinaldi once again. Hope everyone enjoys their Tuesday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes and let's go Wolves.